Welcome to Season 5 of Your Bird Story, a podcast about everyday people and their relationships and interactions with wild birds. I'm your host, Georgia Silvera Seamans. Welcome to another episode of Your Bird Story. I am with Kelli Hata in the studio, and Kelli is the founder of Haecceity project. Welcome, Kelli. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Georgia. Hi, my name is Kelli. I am a graduate student at Yale University at the Divinity School. My program is Master of Arts in Religion, concentration in religion and ecology. I'm actually from California, so even though I've been here a few years, I'm still getting used to the cold weather. And I began the Haecceity project on part from my Yale LEAP Fellowship, which stands for Law, Ethics, and Animals program. Actually, they just recently changed it to Law, Environment, and Animals program, but they accept projects big and small, and I wanted to start something that was bringing in things that I was learning from classes into something that was more practical. So that's how the Haecceity project began.
And why did you choose birds specifically? Is it because of a long-standing interest in birds, or did you become interested in them because you were looking for something for this LEAP program?
Before I was a LEAP fellow, I was working for the Yale Bird Friendly Building Initiative. And that opened my eyes to bird window collisions here on campus. So that specifically influenced the Haecceity project. But I was interested in birds back in California. I used to help rehabilitate songbirds for a local wildlife organization. And I used to be a cat person growing up. I never thought that I would be a bird person. You know, birds' mortal enemies are cats. Yeah, I was transformed taking environmental philosophy classes. And so I wanted to move away from what I was doing while I was also in school, which was I was working at a dog and cat veterinary hospital. And so I wanted to move away from that towards rehabilitating wildlife and seeing how that went and what I was learning in philosophy classes. And I chose songbirds. I'm not sure why. I think because everyone wanted to do either mammals or raptors. And I wanted to do something that no one else was really doing. So I chose songbirds. You have your charismatic species discrimination right there.
Yeah.
So when I was rehabilitating them, I developed a certain sense of their particularity and their behaviors and uniqueness, personalities. Yeah, I just fell in love with songbirds. And so that carried over with me.
Can you describe a particular instance of rehabilitation might look like?
I mainly focused on scrub jays and mockingbirds, as well as hummingbirds. But I would usually receive them when they were still really small and needed to be fed every couple hours. I was also working and going to school at this time, so I would actually bring the birds with me to class, and then I would bring them to the veterinary hospital of course, away from all the other animals. And I would set a timer and, feed them every so often. And I had to let, my professors and my employers know, like, I'm doing this and I might have to step away for a few minutes to feed them. So I was doing that. I also taught my birds to forage and to fly. So I was kind of trying to immerse myself in their perspective and their needs and wants, and working like basically as a mother to them. And so that kind of developed my relationship and how I was able to rehabilitate the birds till they were ready to be released.
That sounds incredible. Were you being trained to do this in the moment, or had you received training prior to taking on this role?
I was being trained.
Do you miss it?
I do. I miss it so much. I live in an apartment building where I can't have any animals unless they're emotional support animal. And so, yeah, I can't have any animals. But I do have a bird feeder right outside my window, and that's the extent of my relationship with the birds over here. And I feed them every single day. But I do miss the hands-on experience for sure.
What species do you get at your bird feeder?
Oh, I get so many. I recently started getting a dark-eyed junco family.
Mm.
They just came a couple days ago, actually, and I've never seen dark-eyed juncos before, which is great because they collide with windows so often here on campus. Red-bellied woodpeckers, blue jays, cardinals, sparrows, mourning doves, and I also had a rare prothonotary warbler come, which was incredible. I was like, oh, what's this yellow bird? And he was just there, just showed up out of nowhere. I've never seen one before, actually anywhere around campus. And so that was a nice experience.
That's super fortunate. I feel like when that warbler shows up in New York City, everyone masses to Central Park. And so to have that bird show up at your feeder feels very special.
Yeah. See, I'm not familiar with East Coast birds as much. Is it quite rare in New York as well?
Yeah, it's rare for it to show up in the city. Yeah. So,
oh, how nice.
Yeah.
I feel lucky.
So you mentioned that dark-eyed juncos, that's a species that collides with glass a lot. Could you talk a little bit more about why that might be and sort of get into the details of your project?
Yes, of course. So part of the Yale Bird Friendly Building Initiative is they document all of the collisions on iNaturalist. And so they're able to see which species tend to collide with windows the most. And dark-eyed juncos are pretty up there. They might even be the most window collisions. And I think it's because of potentially the way that they either see it as see-through or reflective of the vegetation that's near it. So it's probably the way that they view these windows. They don't necessarily see them as windows. That's really disappointing because it's easily preventable. Yale has a lot of money. They can afford to do it. I think maybe part of the reason is they're careful about aesthetics, but that's kind of a silly reason in my view.
Do you know if they started the monitoring program with the intent to make changes to building facades?
Yes, they did. They are, I believe, in contact with certain administration. I know West Campus, they made some changes to the nursing building on account of what the Bird Friendly Building Initiative was doing. unfortunately the building with the most window collisions. Well, they made some changes, I would say, but I think that they could do more. There's still a lot of window collisions there. But yeah, that was the changes that happened were through the Yale Bird Friendly Building Initiative and their advocacy.
So there's that initiative and then your project, and how do those things interface, or in what ways do they connect?
I started this project mostly for personal reasons. So while I was working at the Bird Friendly Building Initiative and seeing all these birds die from something so preventable, it wasn't theological. And I wanted to bring that focus to this project, which I was really doing for myself. And, anyone who saw it and maybe was influenced by it and followed it, follow along. But mostly it was for myself and trying to put what I was learning into practice. And for the LEAP Fellowship, of course, I wanted to do some kind of project, definitely a small one, but I was doing tons of other things, so I didn't want it to be super huge. And so the Haecceity project, I think, was just the right amount of my time and energy and something that I really cared about.
And could you talk a little bit about the name and the meaning behind the name?
Yes, Haecceity. So that was coined by John Duns Scotus. He's a theologian, and it means thisness, which in other words considers the particular essence of a being. And so particularity here is really stressed. And I really like that because I was naming each bird individually as opposed to a group or a species. I wanted to focus on their individuality. So I thought the name was quite fitting.
Yeah, that's one of the elements of your project that stands out to me is you name each bird that you encounter. And I'm curious if you have a naming system or if the actual encounter with the bird inspires the name.
I've named some after my friends. Mm-hmm. I don't know how they would feel about it, but it's an honorary name. It's not, anything negative. If I come across a word and something that I've read and I really liked it, I would name a bird after it, or an author that I admire. And I also had children name them as well, and that was really cool. They come up with the funniest names sometimes. So yeah, that has been largely the way that I name the birds.
How did you reach out to children in this naming process?
Oh, I knew them. So I just wanted to share with them what I was doing, and they're very mature for their age and they wanted to be involved. And so the naming, I think, really emphasized their care for the birds.
How do you feel when you encounter the birds in the landscape?
Frustrated, sad. Whenever I come across a dead bird, I think of my own birds. So there's that element of relationship and particularity, personal experience, and frustration because I wish that Yale could fix this problem. It's totally preventable, and there's so much awareness now than when I first started. I hope it was in part because I was tagging the organizations around Yale and also adding the location. And I've noticed more students are submitting dead birds on iNaturalist. So there is a growing awareness, even though the students are growing in awareness. Yale hasn't really done enough, I think.
Okay. So they haven't done enough. What specifically would you like them to do? You mentioned West Campus, which is where the nursing school is. There was another building that you mentioned. If you had the ear of the decision maker on campus around making buildings bird friendly, what would be your list that you would present to that person?
Yes. So the building that I don't think I mentioned the name, but it's the Yale School of Management's Evans Hall. And that is the most problematic building. And when you look at it, there's just glass everywhere. And it's a eyesore for sure, I think. I would certainly present to Yale at least the major problematic buildings, which are Evans Hall. West Campus also has a few, such as the Conference Center. And I would ask them maybe to collaborate with Feather Friendly, and they did that for the McCormick in Chicago.
Yes.
I really like what they're doing, and I would hopefully like to see a collaboration with Yale.
Do you know if the university has a policy for new buildings that they should use bird-friendly materials?
They do, yes, they do. And I think when they were reconstructing the Peabody Museum, they did it within that new regulation.
What do you do with the dead birds after you've added them to iNaturalist, given them a name and a story?
So when I was working for the initiative, I would put the birds in a bag with a label, and the birds would be filed in the Peabody Museum. Now that I haven't worked for the initiative, I don't come across as many dead birds. I think because I'm just not really looking for them as much anymore. But when I do come across, I take a picture, post it on iNaturalist. I haven't done the same process, but the other student research assistants would be able to visit that location and record it within the Peabody Museum.
As a student at the Divinity School, I suppose thinking about spiritual connections with birds, our ethical responsibility to animals and other life that are not human, where does this project fit in, and how can folks outside of a divinity school, for example, sort of embrace these values?
I like to say that my lifelong project is to learn how to love better. And so one not need be religious or spiritual to learn how to love better. And this includes expanding one circle of care to species or individuals that one might not necessarily consider or think are scary or ugly or gross. I mean, birds are cute, so you don't really have a problem with that. Other species as well, such as maybe mosquitoes or cockroaches.
I like that idea of loving better. I think even within birds, there are bird species that, for various reasons, people are antagonistic towards them. Do you have a sense of when you feel that the project might sunset? Is it when you leave New Haven? Do you think you would continue this work elsewhere?
Yeah, I am graduating this year. So I have been wondering if I would continue the project after graduation. I don't even think that I will stay in New Haven. So I don't know. I'm not sure where the road ahead is. Since the bird window collisions are recorded on iNaturalist, I may just continue naming and posting, but not as a Yale student and not through the LEAP student fellowship.
Really, thank you so much, Kelli. It was great to connect this way. I follow the project on Instagram, and it is sad to see a new post, but there's a way in which you write about each of the dead birds that you encounter that is hopeful and inspiring, and I hope others are finding that message in your work.
Oh, thank you so much, Georgia.
Thank
This has
you.
been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Your Bird Story. Tune in on the second Thursday of next month for the next episode. In the meantime, explore our archives, like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Your Bird Story is edited and produced by Pod to the People. Your Bird Story is an initiative of Local Nature Lab.